Hey everyone, this is Erica Sabo. Welcome to another episode of Mind Bit. Hey everyone, I hope you are well. So today I'm doing a very special video that a lot of you have been requesting, and that is my top 5 favorite Final Fantasy games. I grew up playing Final Fantasy games. They were actually my first JRPG series I got to get into, and I love them. I feel very differently obviously now about the series, and the way that Square Enix has approached the series as of recently, but it defined who I am. It defined who I am, and that's something to celebrate. That's something that I definitely think a lot of people have to celebrate, actually. So let's get right to it. So number 5 on my list goes out to Final Fantasy 2 or 4. Now, this game was amazing. It was just such a classic fantasy story, and just a really amazing game for its time. I always make sure to tell people that they need to check out Final Fantasy 4, because while the story is very traditional, while it doesn't really pull any punches, it's classic, and the series probably wouldn't be what it would later become if it wasn't for a game like this. While there are other Final Fantasy games that I really enjoy that were like earlier on in the series, this one really stood out for me, and it's definitely one to check out for the story, for the characters. Just very classic feel. Really nice blast from the past. Number 4 on my list goes out to Final Fantasy Tactics on the PlayStation 1. This game really got me into strategy RPGs. I loved its in-depth combat system. I loved its in-depth strategy. I loved how melodramatic the story was, actually. I liked how it had a very serious note. And yeah, it was just really cool. You had a bunch of different job systems you could choose from. The job system is probably one of my favorites to date. And it was a very challenging game, but a very rewarding game at the same time. I can't say every aspect of it was very rewarding, such as the final boss, wink wink, and Cloud, wink wink. But, you know, I mean, overall, I thought it was a really rewarding game, a really great game, and one you definitely need to check out if you haven't played strategy RPGs. And yeah, it's a great gateway. It's a really great, challenging gateway into the genre. Number 3 goes out to Final Fantasy X on the PlayStation 2. I adore this game. I know a lot of people have a lot of complaining to do. I know that the game is quite linear, but when you think about the story and the emotional elements and how it made me feel growing up, it was enormous. It was amazing. It was groundbreaking in so many different ways. Definitely not the best Final Fantasy game, but one of the best. And that's part of why it's number 3. The characters, like, I love Yuna. Yuna is just one of my favorite video game characters of all time. And just everybody's chemistry and how distinct and how different all of the characters were, and how engaging the story was, and how original it was at the same time. Of course, it had its tropes, but it really stood out for me, and it's a game that I always recommend when it comes to Final Fantasies. A lot of people might tease about it, might talk about, it's not that great, or they might even tease the voice acting, which I've heard several times. But I thought it was a really great game for its time, and I think it really helped to take the Final Fantasy series to a whole new level after the PlayStation 1 era. It's definitely worth checking out if you haven't already. Number 2 on my list goes out to Final Fantasy 3 or Final Fantasy 6. Now, I know some of you might be like, what? Why is this number 2? And I understand, but there are certain things about this game that I still, how should I put this? There are a lot of characters. And I can't delve into every single one of them the way I want to. The story, for me, is what stood out most. The characters, while some of them are absolutely amazing, there are a lot that were neglected during the experience, and that is part of why it is on my number 2. But aside from that, it's as groundbreaking as people say it is. This is an amazing game, very ambitious game for its time. I can't even believe that a game of this size, this caliber, was able to come out on the Super Nintendo. It has a very touching story. It has an extremely likable villain. You gotta love Kefka. It had some amazing music in it. It was just, the story was so unlike anything we had experienced yet in the Final Fantasy series. And that's something to celebrate over. That's something that I really commend I really commend Squaresoft for doing. It's definitely one you need to check out if you haven't already. It's a classic, just a total classic. And my number one Final Fantasy game is Final Fantasy IX, which should come as no surprise to some of you. Whether we're talking the classic fantasy story, the character chemistry, the distinct characters, the likable characters, the fun nature of it all, the humor, the seriousness, the everything about it for me epitomizes a fantasy. This is fantasy for me, and this is part of why it's my number one game. There's something so magical about this game, so whimsical about this game. I can hardly even express how much I love it. And then of course we got Tetramaster. Tetramaster rocked, you gotta give it that. Everything about this game I adore deeply, and it's a game that I wish more people would appreciate, to be honest, in the Final Fantasy series. I'm really happy to have this game in my collection, and I'm really happy to have played it. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it if you want a fun time. It's just a bit on the slow side nowadays when you play it, but that never stops it from being an amazing game. Definitely check it out. So I hope you enjoyed my top 5 Final Fantasies. I'm really curious to know what your top 5 are, so please leave them in the comments below, or make a video if you want. Do whatever you want. But yeah, I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts and your choices, and yeah, we'll talk soon. Alright, have a good one, guys. Peace.